Everyone thought it was a dream come true. On a crisp spring afternoon in Charleston, South Carolina, 29-year-old Avery Jamison stood at the altar wearing a soft ivory gown that clung to her like a second skin. Her smile beamed so bright it could have lit the church walls without the chandeliers above. Her dark curls framed her face in perfect symmetry, and her eyes, painted with hope and maybe a little fear, locked onto the man she was promising to spend the rest of her life with. Noah Whitaker, 33, stood tall and proud beside her, a man whose presence demanded the room. His tailored navy blue tuxedo clung to his broad shoulders, and his clenched jaw twitched ever so slightly as the vows were exchanged. To everyone watching, it looked like nervous excitement. But to those who truly knew him, if anyone ever really did, there was something else behind his gaze. A quiet storm waiting for a reason. They had only been dating for 9 months. It started like most whirlwind romances do, fast, intoxicating, and addictive. Noah met Avery at a friend's engagement party. She was bartending to make ends meet while attending grad school for psychology. He was an established fitness entrepreneur, already wealthy from a chain of gyms he'd built from the ground up after a tough childhood. To Avery, he was magnetic, confident, charming, and generous. The kind of man who could lift you off the ground just by being in the room. Within weeks, he was picking her up from class in his Tesla, sending her food while she studied, showing up at her door unannounced with flowers, and staying the night. To Noah, she was everything he ever wanted, beautiful, nurturing, loyal, and best of all, his. He liked to joke that she was his reward for surviving his mother's beatings and his father's absence. He told her she was the only woman who had ever made him feel peace. What Avery didn't realize was that peace, in Noah's world, came at a price. And that price was absolute control. Still, no one saw trouble coming. To outsiders, they were the perfect couple, attractive, accomplished, and madly in love. They traveled constantly. Weekend getaways to Miami, romantic stays in mountain cabins, skydiving in Nevada, matching tattoos on their ribs. Their Instagram feed was a fairy tale painted in filters and captions like "My Always" and "Forever Starts Now." When Noah proposed on the beach during a surprise trip to Tulum, Avery said yes before he even finished the question. He had been planning it for weeks, telling her he wanted to start forever sooner than later. She never questioned the urgency, but there were cracks beneath the surface. Small, sharp ones she had learned to ignore, like the time she went out for drinks with a friend and came back to 37 missed calls and a dozen angry texts. Or the time she wore a dress that showed too much of her legs and he made her change before they left for dinner. He always apologized afterward. Soft voice, sad eyes, talking about how he just didn't want to lose her. And she believed him. She wanted to believe love could be fierce and protective, not toxic. By the time the wedding came around, her doubts were buried under layers of white lace and hope. She told herself all couples argue, that jealousy meant he cared, that this was just a phase, and once they were married, things would settle down. The wedding was held in an old southern mansion with rose vines curling around its grand columns. Her mother cried during the vows. Noah's sister gave a toast about how her brother had finally found the one who tamed him. Everyone laughed, even Avery. But in her gut, something fell off. That night, they danced under a canopy of string lights while the sky melted into twilight. Noah held her tightly, whispering promises in her ear. "You're mine now," he murmured, his lips brushing her temple. Forever. On their wedding night, he carried her into the honeymoon suite, like something out of a romance novel. The room was lit by flickering candles, and champagne waited on ice. Everything was perfect, but when she excused herself to the bathroom to take off her makeup, she left her phone on the nightstand, and he saw it. Just one message. A name he recognized. Jaden. It was nothing romantic. Just an old text from 3 weeks ago. "Hope you're happy. He's not who you think." That was all it said. Noah didn't mention it that night. He smiled, laughed, toasted her under the dim light, kissed her slowly, possessively. But inside, something dark had begun to spread. Not just suspicion, not just jealousy. Betrayal. The next 2 days passed with an eerie stillness. They told friends they were staying local for a staycation honeymoon. Noah canceled a trip to Aruba without telling her. He said he wanted their first days as husband and wife to be quiet, private, isolated. Avery didn't protest. She thought it was sweet, maybe even romantic. They barely left the house. They cooked dinner together, watched movies, sat on the back porch under the stars. But there were moments she caught him just watching her, his eyes not loving or soft, but analytical, cold, measuring her silences, watching how she texted, how she moved, when she looked away. And still, she smiled. Still, she kissed him goodnight. Because that's what love was supposed to be: patient, forgiving, strong. But Noah wasn't built for patience. And when he loved, he didn't love in halves. He loved with the full weight of his fears, his rage, and his need to own. 3 days. That's all it took. 3 days after they said, "I do," Avery would be lying face down on their bedroom floor. Her lips blue, her ribs fractured, her wedding band still pressed against her swollen knuckle. But in this moment, the moment before everything fell apart, Avery didn't know she was already living her final chapter. She was still dancing in the illusion, still believing in the man who had promised her forever, not knowing that forever, for him, meant no way out. There are 2 versions of every love story. The one we show the world, perfect, curated, glowing, and the one that festers in silence, behind closed doors, where truths grow mold and lies become survival. Avery Jamison was no stranger to secrets, but she never imagined hers would lead her into a coffin less than a week after tying the knot. 3 weeks before the wedding, she had stood in the parking lot of a quiet cafe off King Street, her hands shaking as she deleted a message she should have never answered. Jaden Carter, her ex, her mistake, her secret. He wasn't someone she had ever planned to revisit. They'd ended badly, with shouting matches, sleepless nights, and a shattered lamp in her apartment. But the thing about history is that it doesn't stay buried. It lingers like smoke, harmless at first, until it chokes you. Jaden had reached out under the pretense of closure. One conversation, he had said, "I just need to see you." And she had agreed, not because she wanted him back, but because some part of her, deep down, needed to know if she was making the right choice by marrying Noah. That conversation only lasted 12 minutes. She remembered because she kept checking her phone, terrified Noah would text, would call, would somehow know. Jaden didn't beg. He didn't cry. He simply told her, "He's not stable. Avenue. I know men like him. They don't love you. They consume you." She left angry, not because he was wrong, but because he was right, and because she already knew it. But what could she do? The wedding invitations had gone out. The dress had been tailored. Her mother had already taken out a loan for flowers. Backing out now would destroy everything. And maybe, just maybe, Noah would change after they got married. Maybe the jealousy would quiet. Maybe he'd finally feel secure enough to let her breathe. She never saw Jaden again, but she never blocked his number either. The message he sent the night of their wedding wasn't a threat. It wasn't even romantic. It was a last attempt at saving someone who didn't want to be saved. Hope you're happy. He's not who you think. Short, simple, the kind of sentence that could unravel an entire world. Noah had read it while Avery was in the bathroom. He didn't say a word. He didn't scream or confront her. He simply deleted it, then calmly went into her photo gallery, her emails, her deleted texts. He found nothing. Nothing concrete, anyway. But in Noah's mind, a seed had been planted, and his kind of love never made room for doubt. In the days that followed, he became quieter. Not colder, just quieter. He smiled at her, kissed her forehead, asked if she wanted pancakes or waffles for breakfast. But behind that calm was a man unraveling in silence. To Noah, betrayal wasn't just disloyalty. It was humiliation. It was weakness. And he had spent his entire life fighting weakness. His mother had cheated on his father countless times, bringing strange men into the house while little Noah hid under the bed. He had watched his father come home drunk, pull off his belt, and beat her until she bled. And still, she never stopped. He had promised himself, even as a boy, that he'd never be like his father. He wouldn't scream. He wouldn't raise a hand. He'd choose better. He'd control better. But no matter how much money he made or how many muscles he packed onto his frame, that fear never left. The fear of being the fool in the story. And now, with Avery, it felt like history was trying to repeat itself. He started watching her more closely. He noticed every time she picked up her phone and tilted the screen slightly away. He noticed how often she went to the other room to answer texts. She laughed less. Her eyes darted more. She'd grown tense since the wedding, more cautious, like someone trying to tiptoe through a minefield. And the truth was, Avery was scared. Not because she had anything to hide, but because she could feel the change in Noah. The way he stared at her for just a second too long. The way his silences stretched into something sinister. The way he'd asked the same question twice, but in different tones, testing her responses like puzzles he needed to solve. She started deleting her call logs. Not because she was talking to Jaden. She hadn't spoken to him since that final message, but because she didn't want Noah asking about the delivery guy who rang twice, or her cousin who joked too flirtatiously, or the random telemarketer she hung up on too quickly. It wasn't cheating. It was protection. But secrets don't need to be true to be fatal. In Noah's mind, her fear was confirmation. Her nervousness was guilt. And every soft apology from her lips sounded like a carefully rehearsed lie. He started sleeping with his phone under his pillow, setting up cameras in the living room for security, checking their Ring doorbell history late at night. He created fake accounts to test if her old exes would still engage with her. None did, but that only made him more certain. If she was covering her tracks this well, she must be hiding something big. One night, she caught him scrolling through her iPad while she slept. She didn't say anything. She just rolled over and pretended not to notice. And that hurt more than the spying itself. Because silence in a marriage is its own betrayal. By the third day, Avery had stopped smiling. She spent more time in the guest room, organizing gifts, more time on walks by herself, more time staring at herself in the mirror like she didn't recognize the reflection anymore. She was trapped by the vows, by the guilt, by the man who had once swept her off her feet and was now watching her from across the room like a predator stalking its prey. Noah began rehearsing scenarios in his head. Confrontations, confessions, ultimatums. He told himself he just needed answers, just the truth. Then he could decide whether to forgive her or not. But Noah didn't want the truth. He wanted control. He wanted ownership. He wanted Avery to be his entirely, without doubt, without deviation, without history. And when that version of Avery didn't exist, when he realized she wasn't a fantasy but a human with a past, he made a decision. He wasn't going to lose her to someone else. If he couldn't have the version of her he built in his head, he'd rather have none of her at all. It was supposed to be paradise. Their honeymoon itinerary had originally included 5 nights in Aruba, a luxury beachfront suite, candlelit dinners, couples massages. Avery had spent weeks planning it down to the hour, color-coding activities. In a shared Google Doc Noah never bothered to open. But 3 days before the wedding, he told her he wanted to cancel. Too commercial, he said. Too crowded. Let's just be together, somewhere quiet, just us. Avery had smiled and nodded, pretending it didn't sting. She told her mother plans had changed, said something about preferring something more intimate. But the truth was, Noah had already started isolating her long before the wedding photos were even printed. Instead of sun-soaked beaches and tropical cocktails, their honeymoon took place in a remote lake house Noah claimed he had inherited from his uncle, 2 hours outside Charleston, down a winding road with no cell reception and no nearby neighbors. The kind of quiet that made your ears ring. They arrived on a Monday evening. The air smelled of pine and rain, and the house creaked like it had secrets to tell. Noah carried her over the threshold like a scene from a movie, but Avery's laughter had a hollow edge to it, like she knew something about the ending she couldn't yet explain. Inside, the house was rustic. 1 bedroom, no television, and a roaring fireplace that Noah insisted on using every night, even though it was already June. He said he wanted to slow things down, to be present, to detox from the world. But it wasn't detox, it was surveillance. It was isolation. It was a man building a world small enough to keep his wife in a box he could control. At first, Avery tried to enjoy it. She cooked breakfast in the tiny kitchen, wore silk robes, took long baths. She even read a book, something she hadn't done in months. But the silence pressed in quickly. There was no music, no reception, no internet. She asked about the Wi-Fi, and Noah responded flatly, "We don't need it. This is real life." But real life felt like a trap. Every movement she made was shadowed. If she went to pour a drink, he appeared behind her. If she stepped outside for fresh air, he followed within minutes. She started to feel like a guest in her own skin. Even at night, when she rolled away from him in bed, he'd pull her back with one arm, whispering things that felt more like commands and affection. "You're mine. No one knows you like I do. I married you so you'll never leave." It wasn't romantic anymore. It was suffocating. On the second night, things changed. They had just finished dinner, pasta and red wine by candlelight. Avery wore a soft cream sweater and barely spoke during the meal. Her phone buzzed twice from her purse in the other room. She tensed, trying not to react. She hadn't spoken to anyone in 2 days. Not her sister. Not her friends. Noah kept insisting they needed space from the noise. But the sound of those buzzes made something inside him snap. He stood from the table, without a word, and walked toward the living room. She followed, half-heartedly trying to play it off. "Probably just spam," she said with a fake smile. But he didn't respond. He was already pulling the phone from her purse, already scrolling through the screen. There was nothing damning, just a missed call from her cousin and a group chat notification from her college friends. But in Noah's eyes, the damage was already done. "You lied to me," he muttered. Avery frowned. "What are you talking about? I haven't said a word to anyone. You're hiding things." His voice was low, like a wire stretched too tight. "You can't even go 2 days without reaching out to someone. Can't even give me that. It's not a crime to check my phone, Noah." "No," he said, "but it's a betrayal when I'm giving you everything and you're still reaching out to other people. People who hate me. People who want us to fail." Avery took a step back. For the first time, the space between them felt dangerous. "Noah," she said softly, "I'm not reaching out to anyone. You're making something out of nothing." But he wasn't listening anymore. He was pacing now, breathing heavily, clutching her phone like it was evidence. And then came the question, sharp, sudden, and cruel. "Did you sleep with him?" It wasn't said aloud. It was spat, almost whispered, but laced with venom. Avery's heart dropped. She didn't need to ask who him was. Her voice caught in her throat. "No," she said, her words trembling. "I told you. That's done. It was nothing. We talked, that's it. But it didn't matter." Noah didn't want denial. He wanted repentance. He wanted punishment. That night, he locked the bedroom door from inside and took her phone, saying she needed to detox from outside influences. She sat in silence as he placed it in the drawer and kissed her forehead. "This is for us," he whispered. "You'll thank me later." Avery didn't sleep. By the third day, the tension in the house was unbearable. She tried to make tea, and her hand shook so badly she spilled it. She tried to write in her journal, and Noah asked what she was hiding. She went outside to walk by the lake, and he trailed behind her, barefoot and silent, like a ghost. It felt like being hunted. Every room had become a prison cell. Every conversation, an interrogation. She started flinching when he raised his voice, even in laughter. She avoided eye contact. She stopped eating. She knew something was coming. She just didn't know when. And Noah, he was changing too. His eyes grew darker, the shadows beneath them deepening. He stopped shaving, stopped speaking in full sentences. He sat for hours staring at nothing, his hand clenched around the remote even though the TV was unplugged. He looked like a man unraveling, one thread at a time. On the third evening, as the sun set behind the trees, painting the sky in blood-orange streaks, Avery stood in front of the bathroom mirror brushing her hair. She looked pale, distant, like someone who had already said goodbye to herself. And then she heard it, the slow creak of the floorboards behind her. No footsteps, just that sound. She turned. Noah was standing there, in the doorway, silent, watching. He didn't speak. He didn't blink. He just stared. And in that moment, long before the screams, the blood, the betrayal turned fatal, Avery knew this honeymoon wasn't beginning. It was a countdown. June 11th, 10:42 p.m. Avery Jamison's screams echoed once through the forest surrounding the lake house. Then the world went eerily still. 3 days after they said, "I do," Avery's lifeless body lay crumpled on the cold hardwood floor, her blood soaking into the grains beneath her wedding night slippers. The house, so quiet you could hear the wind breathing through the walls, had finally fulfilled its true purpose. Not as a sanctuary for lovers, but a tomb for one. And Noah? He sat on the edge of the bed, shirtless, hands trembling and wet, not with remorse, but with disbelief, not because he didn't mean to do it, but because it felt too easy. The descent hadn't been sudden. It was slow, controlled, calculated, a simmering madness that he nursed like a glass of whiskey, patiently, purposefully. That morning, Avery had tried to leave. It wasn't dramatic. She didn't scream or pack bags or throw things. She simply stood by the door holding her shoes and whispered, "Noah, I need space. Just a day or two. I'm not doing this to hurt you." But Noah had seen this before. Women walking away like they had the right, like they weren't supposed to belong to someone. He blocked the door with his body, smiled, said, "You just need to calm down." And Avery, so exhausted from 3 days of walking on eggshells, had folded, not out of love, but survival. She backed away, sat down, cried quietly into her hands. He watched her cry and felt nothing. That evening, she cooked dinner, her last, roasted chicken. Her hands shook while seasoning it, and she kept dropping the pepper grinder. Noah watched from the kitchen island, eyes fixed, silent, calculating. The final straw wasn't another text message. It wasn't even another lie. It was laughter. Avery had stepped outside after dinner to breathe. Just 5 minutes. The stars were out, and for the first time in days, she felt human. She called her cousin from the deck, using the emergency phone she'd hidden in her suitcase, praying for a lifeline. She kept her voice low, but when her cousin answered with a joke, "Still alive out there in serial killer woods?" Avery had let out a real laugh. It wasn't loud. It wasn't long, but it was joy. And Noah, who stood watching from the darkened kitchen window, felt that laugh like a knife carving into his spine. He didn't say anything when she came back inside. He didn't yell. He didn't accuse her. He just poured 2 glasses of wine and waited. They sat on the couch as the fireplace crackled beside them. The wine was sweet, but bitter with tension. Avery kept her knees pulled to her chest. Noah stared straight ahead. He asked her questions she didn't want to answer. "Do you love me?" "Yes." "Are you afraid of me?" A long pause. "No." "Would you ever leave me?" She hesitated. And in that hesitation, Noah found all the evidence he ever needed. She wasn't his. Not fully. Not unconditionally. She still belonged to someone else. Her past, her freedom, herself. So he stood, calm, unbothered, walked into the bedroom. When he returned, he was holding the belt he wore on their wedding day. Black leather. Silver buckle. Avery stood too, confused, alert now. Her body shifted toward the hallway. "Noah," she said carefully, "what are you doing?" His eyes were distant, detached. "If you won't be mine," he said, "you won't be anyone's." She ran. She didn't scream at first. She just ran barefoot across the living room toward the front door. But the locks were back on. She scrambled with the knob. Behind her, he moved silently, like a hunter in familiar woods. She turned, tried to grab a lamp, anything to defend herself. But he was faster. The belt wrapped around her neck before she could scream the second time. His hand pulled it tight, and they struggled, her feet kicking, her nails digging into his arms, her voice a choking gasp. She clawed at his face, ripped his shirt, fought harder than he ever imagined. But Noah was possessed, not with rage, not with hate, but with a twisted sense of righteousness. He wasn't killing her, he told himself. He was rescuing her. From lies. From betrayal. from the part of herself she tried to keep separate from him. When it was over, she wasn't in his arms. She was on the floor, eyes open, hands limp. Her wedding ring had come off during the struggle. It rolled across the hardwood, circling twice before coming to a stop beside the bookshelf. Noah stared at her face. For a moment, he waited for her to blink, to gasp, to call his name, but she didn't. And in the stillness that followed, he felt a weight, not guilt, not horror, just inevitability. This was always going to happen, because people like Avery didn't stay. They didn't surrender. They didn't forgive. They didn't love the way Noah needed to be loved. He sat beside her body for what felt like hours. He didn't cry. He didn't panic. He just thought about their first date, their first kiss, their first lie. And then he got up. He dragged her body to the couch, gently, laid her there like she had just fallen asleep, cleaned the floor with bleach, opened the windows, lit a candle. Then he sat at the table and opened her journal, page after page of her fears, her doubts, her confusion. Noah read them all, and for the first time he felt something like regret, not because he'd killed her, but because she had truly been afraid. She had wanted to leave him. Yes, but she hadn't cheated. She hadn't betrayed him. She was just scared. But it was too late now. The love was gone. The silence was forever. The honeymoon had ended, exactly the way it was always meant to, in blood. June 12th, 6:17 a.m. The sheriff's deputy found her body with the birds. Morning sunlight streamed through the dusty lake house windows, as if trying to shine light on the sins sealed within. Avery Jamison lay on the living room couch, head tilted slightly, eyes open, skin gray. At first glance, it could have passed for sleep, peaceful even, until you noticed the purple bruises around her neck. The house smelled of bleach and lavender candles, a pathetic attempt to mask the violence that had bloomed there just hours before. Blood had been scrubbed from the hardwood, and a bouquet of dead roses sat wilting on the kitchen counter. Her wedding veil was folded neatly on the coffee table, untouched, pristine. And Noah? He was on the back deck in a rocking chair, still wearing his wedding ring, eyes fixed on the lake. He didn't flinch when the officers approached. He didn't run, didn't cry. He just said one sentence. I did what had to be done. He was arrested without incident. Back at the station, Noah told the story with an eerie calmness. No shouting, no hysteria, just a chilling sense of finality. He claimed Avery was planning to humiliate him, to leave him, to shatter the vow they had barely just made. In his eyes, he wasn't a murderer. He was a husband who'd been broken by betrayal. She never really loved me, he said in the interrogation room. She just wore the dress, played the part. When detectives asked about the belt, the bruises, the struggle marks on her arms, he didn't deny it. I wanted her to understand, he muttered, but she wouldn't listen. The town of Somerville erupted. News of Avery's murder spread like wildfire, especially once local media reported the timing. 3 days after the wedding, her bridal photos were still pinned to the chapel bulletin board, her name still on place cards, her laughter still echoing in family phones. Her mother, Georgia Jamison, collapsed in the front yard when the officers came to tell her. Her baby girl was gone, and the man she had just toasted at the wedding dinner was her killer. Georgia begged for the death penalty. Noah's trial began 6 months later. The courtroom was packed. Reporters, former classmates, teachers who remembered Avery as a sweet girl with a bright smile. Her cousin took the stand and read a transcript of their final phone call, her voice breaking when she said, she didn't even say goodbye. She just whispered, I'm scared. The prosecution painted Noah as a manipulative abuser who didn't snap but planned. They showed photos of the cabin, the belt, the scratches on his arms, clear signs that Avery had fought for her life. They played her voicemails, where she talked about being watched all the time, about not being allowed to speak to friends. But the most damning piece of evidence? Her journal. It was found hidden beneath a loose floorboard in the guest bedroom. Detectives believe she hid it days before the wedding, continuing to write in it during the honeymoon. The entries were raw, honest. In them, she admitted she was afraid of Noah, confessed she had once spoken to an old flame during a fight, but never cheated. She questioned if she should go through with the marriage, but felt trapped by expectations, afraid of what he might do if she backed out. On the final page, dated the night before her death, she wrote, "If anything happens to me, Noah did it. Please don't let him get away with it." The courtroom fell silent. Noah's defense attorney tried to argue mental instability, claiming he suffered from delusional jealousy and emotional trauma from past abandonment. But no mental evaluation could erase the coldness with which he described Avery's final moments, or the way he arranged her body after murder, like a doll returned to its box. The jury deliberated for just 4 hours. Guilty, first-degree murder. He was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. But the scars didn't end with a verdict. Avery's family launched a foundation in her name, the Avery Project, dedicated to supporting women experiencing coercive control and psychological abuse in romantic relationships. Georgia Jamison became a voice for survivors, speaking at universities and domestic violence shelters about the red flags her daughter saw but couldn't escape. She didn't die because she made a mistake. Georgia said in one televised interview, "She died because a man thought marriage was ownership, and nobody stopped him in time." Her story became a warning. Not every monster looks like one on the wedding day. Not every bride walks away glowing. And sometimes the honeymoon is where the real horror begins. As for Noah, he never showed remorse. In a prison interview 2 years later, he said, "I wanted a wife, not a liar." He now lives in isolation at the South Carolina Correctional Institution. No visitors, no letters, just 4 walls, and silence. The same silence Avery must have felt when she realized love wouldn't save her, that it never really had. If this story gripped you the way it did us, don't forget to subscribe to the Family Crime Exposed. We uncover the darkest secrets buried behind family portraits, where love turns lethal and trust becomes a weapon. Like, comment, and share if you believe every hidden truth deserves to be told. And remember, sometimes the people closest to you are the ones you should fear the most.